The rooster's crow pierced through the pre-dawn darkness at 4:30 a.m., just as it had every morning for the past 15 years on Samuel Miller's farm. But this October morning felt different. A thick fog had rolled in overnight, unusual for this time of year, blanketing the Lancaster County farmland in an ethereal white shroud that made the familiar landscape seem foreign and mysterious. Samuel pulled on his worn work boots, the leather soft and molded to his feet from years of use. His calloused hands, marked by decades of honest labor, fumbled briefly with the laces in the dim light of the kerosene lamp. Rebecca stirred beside him, her hand reaching out instinctively to touch his arm. "Early even for you," she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. "Something feels off this morning," Samuel replied in Pennsylvania Dutch, their native tongue. He couldn't explain the unease that had settled in his chest, like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through his usually calm demeanor. "The animals are too quiet." Rebecca's eyes opened fully then, concern flickering across her weathered but kind face. In their 20 years of marriage, she had learned to trust her husband's instinct. Samuel had a way with the land and the animals that went beyond mere farming knowledge. It was as if he could sense when something was amiss in the natural order of things. "Should I come with you?" she asked, already beginning to sit up. No, stay warm. I'll just check the chickens and be back for breakfast." He leaned down to kiss her forehead, a gesture of tenderness that had never faded, despite the years. "Tell the children to start their chores when they wake." Samuel made his way downstairs, each wooden step creaking under his weight in a familiar symphony he could navigate blindfolded. The house, built by his grandfather's hands, held 3 generations of memories within its simple walls. He paused at the kitchen, lighting another lantern and grabbing a bucket of feed from the pantry. The moment he stepped outside, the fog enveloped him like a living thing. He could barely see 10 feet ahead, and the usual morning sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant lowing of cattle from neighboring farms, were muffled, creating an almost supernatural silence. Even his footsteps on the gravel path seemed to disappear into the white void. The chicken coop stood about 50 yards from the main house, a sturdy structure his eldest son, Jacob, had helped him rebuild just last summer, after a particularly harsh winter had damaged the roof. As Samuel approached, he expected to hear the usual cacophony of clucking and fluttering as the chickens sensed his arrival with their morning feed. Instead, there was an uncertain quiet, broken only by an occasional nervous rustle. He pulled open the coop door, holding his lantern high. The chickens were all huddled in the far corner, pressed against each other in a way he'd never seen before, not even when a fox had gotten too close to the coop last spring. Their eyes reflected the lamplight, wide and fearful. "What's got into you all?" Samuel muttered, stepping inside. The familiar smell of hay and chickens filled his nostrils, but there was something else, something that didn't belong, a scent he couldn't quite place. Sweet, like flowers, but wrong for this place, wrong for this season. As he moved the lantern in a slow arc, checking for signs of a predator or damage to the coop, the light fell upon something that made his heart stop. In the corner opposite the chickens, curled up in the hay like a wounded animal, was a child. Samuel's bucket of feed clattered to the floor, corn kernels scattering across the wooden planks. For a moment he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. His mind struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. A little girl, no more than 6 years old by his estimation, was huddled in his chicken coop. Her dark hair was matted and tangled with bits of straw. Her clothes, a thin blue dress, far too inadequate for the October chill, were torn and dirty, but it was the chain that made bile rise in his throat. A rusted chain, the kind used for farm equipment, was wrapped around her ankle, the end attached to a thick post that supported the coop's structure. "Gott im Himmel," Samuel breathed, invoking God in heaven as he dropped to his knees beside the child. She flinched at his approach, pressing herself further into the corner, her eyes green as spring grass, wide with terror. "It's all right, little one," Samuel said softly, switching to English, unsure if she would understand Pennsylvania Dutch. His voice shook, despite his efforts to remain calm. "I won't hurt you. My name is Samuel. I'm here to help." The girl stared at him, her small body trembling. Samuel could see now that her arms were covered in bruises, some purple fresh, others yellowing with age. Her feet were bare and bloody, and her lips were cracked from dehydration. How long had she been here? He had been in this coop just yesterday evening, collecting eggs. Someone had put her here during the night. "Can you tell me your name?" Samuel asked, slowly reaching into his pocket for the multi-tool he always carried. He needed to get that chain off her ankle, but he didn't want to frighten her further with sudden movements. The girl's mouth opened, closed, opened again, when she finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and painful sounding, but the 4 words she uttered sent ice through Samuel's veins. "Daddy said I'm nobody." Samuel's hands shook as he carefully worked at the chain. The metal had rubbed her ankle raw, and he could see the wounds were infected. His mind raced. Who could do this to a child? And why his coop? The Amish community was small, tight-knit. Everyone knew everyone. The thought that one of his neighbors, someone he might have shared a meal with, could be capable of this. "Well, you're somebody to me," Samuel said firmly, finally managing to loosen the chain enough to slip it off her ankle. The girl winced but didn't cry out. "You're a brave little girl who needs help, and I'm going to make sure you get it." He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her tiny frame. She practically disappeared inside it. "Can you walk?" She shook her head, and Samuel could see that her legs were too weak, whether from injury, malnutrition, or both. Without hesitation, he scooped her up in his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like holding a bird with hollow bone. As he carried her toward the house, Samuel's mind was already racing ahead. He would need to call the police, something the Amish rarely did, preferring to handle matters within their own community. But this was beyond their scope. This was evil, pure and simple. He would also need to get her medical attention immediately. The fog was beginning to lift as the sun rose higher, revealing the familiar landscape of his farm. But nothing felt familiar anymore. The discovery of this child had changed everything. As he walked, he felt her head rest against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that nearly broke his heart. "What's your real name, child?" he asked gently. There was a long pause. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Emily, I think it was Emily." "Emily," Samuel repeated, the name a promise on his lips. "You're safe now, Emily, I promise you're safe." But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Someone had chained a child in his chicken coop. Someone who knew his routine, knew he would find her. This wasn't random. This was deliberate, and somewhere out there, in the peaceful farmland of Lancaster County, a monster was watching. Rebecca's scream echoed through the farmhouse when Samuel carried Emily through the kitchen door. The cast-iron skillet she'd been preparing for breakfast clattered to the floor, splattering bacon grease across the worn linoleum. Their 3 children, Jacob 16, Mary 14, and little Ruth 10, came thundering down the stairs, their faces etched with alarm. "God, Samuel, what?" Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth as she took in the child in her husband's arms. The girl was conscious but limp, her green eyes glazed with exhaustion and fear. Rebecca's maternal instincts overrode her shock. "Mary, heat water on the stove." "Jacob, run to the phone shanty and call 911. "Ruth, get the first aid supplies from the bathroom." The children scattered without question, trained from birth to respond to emergencies with swift action rather than panic. The Amish way was one of community and help, and though they lived simply, they were not unprepared for crisis. Samuel laid Emily gently on the kitchen table, which Rebecca had quickly cleared and covered with clean towels. In the bright light of the kitchen, the full extent of the child's condition became horrifyingly clear. Beyond the bruises and the infected ankle wound, they could see burn marks on her arms, deliberate patterned burns that looked like they came from a cigarette. Her ribs were visible through her thin dress, each breath a shallow, painful effort. "Who did this to you, sweet one?" Rebecca asked softly as she began cleaning the ankle wound with warm water and antiseptic. Emily flinched but remained silent, her eyes fixed on some distant point only she could see. "I found her chained in the chicken coop," Samuel explained, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Someone put her there during the night." She paused, swallowing hard. She said, "Her daddy told her she's nobody." Rebecca's eyes met his over the child's frail form, and in that look was a shared horror and determination. They had seen hardship in their community, disease, accidents, even death, but never deliberate cruelty to a child. "Nobody chains a child like an animal," Rebecca whispered in Pennsylvania Dutch, not wanting Emily to understand if she could. "This is evil, Samuel, pure evil." Mary returned with steaming water, her young face pale but determined. At 14, she was already skilled in basic medical care, having helped deliver calves and tend to injured animals. But this was different. This was a human child, broken by human cruelty. "Should I make her something to eat, Mum?" Mary asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Start with warm broth," Rebecca instructed. "Nothing too heavy. Her stomach won't handle it." Jacob burst back through the door, breathing hard from his sprint to the phone shanty, a small structure at the end of their lane where they kept a telephone for emergencies, a compromise between their simple lifestyle and the necessities of the modern world. "The police are coming," he announced, "and an ambulance." "They said 20 minutes. Samuel nodded, placing a protective hand on Emily's head. The girl had closed her eyes, but he could tell she wasn't sleeping. Her body was too tense, like a spring coiled to flee at the slightest threat. "Jacob, go wait by the road to flag them down. Take the big flashlight," Samuel instructed. Though the fog had lifted somewhat, he wanted to make sure the emergency vehicles found them quickly. As they waited, Rebecca continued tending to Emily's wounds with gentle efficiency. Ruth, the youngest, stood nearby, clutching her faceless Amish doll, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Why would someone hurt her, Dat?" Ruth asked Samuel, using the Pennsylvania Dutch word for father. Samuel knelt down to his youngest daughter's level. "I don't know, little one. Sometimes there's evil in the world we can't understand, but we can choose to be God's hands to help and heal. Like the Good Samaritan, exactly like that." Emily's eyes suddenly snapped open, wild with panic. "No," she gasped, trying to sit up. "He'll find me. He said he'd kill anyone who helped me. He said." "Shh, shh," Rebecca soothed gently but firmly, keeping the girl lying down. "No one's going to hurt you here. This is a safe place. You don't understand," Emily whimpered, tears finally breaking through whatever dam had held them back. "He's not really my daddy. He took me. He took me from the playground, and he said if I told anyone, he'd hurt my real mommy. He said nobody would want me now because I'm broken. He said." The sound of sirens in the distance cut through her words. Emily's panic intensified, and she tried to roll off the table. Samuel caught her gently but firmly. "Emily, listen to me," he said, his voice calm and steady, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "These are good people coming to help you. They're going to take you to a hospital where doctors can make you feel better. And then they're going to find your real mummy." "My mummy?" Emily's voice broke on the word, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. She probably thinks I'm dead. It's been so long. So many dark places, so many cars, so many." She trailed off, her eyes going distant again. Samuel and Rebecca exchanged another look. This was bigger than they had imagined. This wasn't just abuse. This was kidnapping, possibly trafficking. The quiet peace of their Amish community had been shattered by an evil they could barely comprehend. The ambulance and police cars pulled into their gravel driveway, lights flashing but sirens now silent. Samuel recognized one of the officers, Deputy Tom Walsh, a good man who had always been respectful of the Amish ways. Tom's face was grim as he approached, his partner and the EMTs close behind. Samuel, Tom greeted with a nod. Jacob told dispatch you found a child. In my chicken coop, Samuel confirmed, stepping aside so the EMTs could reach Emily. She was chained like an animal. She says she was kidnapped, that the man who had her isn't her father. Tom's expression darkened further. He pulled out a notebook. How long do you think she was in there? Couldn't have been more than 8 hours. I was in that coop yesterday evening around 5, collecting eggs. Everything was normal then. As the EMTs began their examination, Emily grabbed Samuel's hand with surprising strength. Don't let him take me, she pleaded. Please don't let him take me back to the dark place. Nobody's taking you anywhere but the hospital. One of the EMTs, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, assured her. And there will be police guards there. You're safe now, sweetheart. Tom pulled Samuel aside. I need to examine the coop, collect evidence. Can you show me? Samuel nodded, but before he could move, Emily's grip on his hand tightened. Will you come with me? She asked, her voice small and frightened. To the hospital? Samuel looked at Tom, then at Rebecca. The Amish typically avoided hospitals unless absolutely necessary, and they certainly didn't involve themselves in police matters. But this child had been placed in his coop for a reason. God had put her in his path. I'll follow in my buggy, Samuel promised Emily. I won't leave you alone. As the EMTs loaded Emily onto a stretcher, she suddenly grabbed Tom's sleeve. The dark place, she said urgently. There are others. Other kids. I could hear them crying through the walls. You have to find them before he moves them. He said he was going to move them soon because I was too much trouble. Tom's radio crackled to life before he could respond. All units be advised. We have an Amber Alert update. Emily Chen, age 6, missing from Philadelphia for 3 months. Possible match to found child in Lancaster County, 3 months. Samuel felt his stomach turn. This little girl had been missing for 3 months, and somehow she had ended up in his chicken coop, 40 miles from where she'd been taken. Emily Chen, Tom asked gently, is that your name? Your full name? The girl nodded weakly. Emily Rose Chen. My mommy is Linda Chen. We live in Philadelphia, 247 Maple Street, apartment 3B. I remembered it. He tried to make me forget, but I remembered everything so I could tell someone if I got away. Smart girl, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. He immediately got on his radio, relaying the information and requesting immediate contact with Philadelphia PD and Emily's mother. As the ambulance prepared to leave, Rebecca appeared with a basket, some food and fresh clothes. She told the and this, she pulled out a small quilt, one she had made for Ruth when she was born. So she has something soft and warm. Emily clutched the quilt to her chest as if it were made of gold. Thank you, she whispered. The ambulance pulled away, and Samuel immediately went to hitch up his buggy. Jacob helped him, working in efficient silence. But as Samuel was about to climb into the driver's seat, Tom stopped him. Samuel, I hate to say this, but whoever did this knew your routine. They knew you'd find her this morning. This might not be random. You and your family need to be careful. Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October morning. You think someone from our community did this? I don't know what to think yet, but someone wanted that girl found, and they wanted you to be the one to find her. The question is why? As Samuel guided his horse down the lane, following the distant lights of the ambulance, he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's 4 words, Daddy said, I'm nobody, were just the beginning of a much darker truth. And somewhere in Lancaster County, or perhaps closer than he wanted to believe, someone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The peaceful Amish community he had known all his life had been infiltrated by an evil that chained children like animals and stripped them of their very identity. But if this evil thought the Amish would simply turn away, would handle this quietly and internally as they did most matters, it had gravely miscalculated, because Samuel Miller had looked into the eyes of a broken child who thought she was nobody, and he had made a promise, not just to Emily but to God himself. He would see justice done, even if it meant breaking with tradition, even if it meant confronting the darkness that had crept into their light. The sun was fully risen now, burning away the last of the fog, but the clarity it brought was not comforting. It only illuminated how much darkness could hide in plain sight, how evil could walk among them wearing the face of a neighbor, a friend, perhaps even family. The Lancaster General Hospital emergency room was a chaos of controlled urgency when Samuel arrived. His horse and buggy looked incongruous in the parking lot among the cars and ambulances, but he had barely secured the reins before a security guard approached. "Sir, you can't park," the guard began, then stopped, recognizing the traditional Amish dress. "Are you with the little girl they just brought in?" "Yes, I'm Samuel Miller. I found her." The guard's expression softened. "Park over there by the tree. I'll keep an eye on your horse." "Detective Walsh said you'd be coming." Samuel nodded his thanks and hurried inside. The automatic doors and fluorescent lights were jarring after the simple morning at his farm. He had been to this hospital only 3 times in his life. Twice for the births of his children when complications arose, and once when Jacob had broken his arm falling from the barn loft. He found Tom Walsh in the waiting area speaking intensely into his phone. When he saw Samuel, he held up a finger and finished his conversation. "Philadelphia PD confirmed it," Tom said without preamble. "Emily Rose Chen, kidnapped from Marconi Plaza playground 3 months ago. Her mother is on her way here now. She never gave up hope." "But Samuel, there's more." Tom led him to a quiet corner, away from the other people waiting. Emily wasn't the first child to go missing in similar circumstances. Over the past 2 years, 12 children have vanished from various places along the East Coast. Different states, different demographics, but all between ages 5 and 8. Emily is the first one to be found alive. Samuel felt his knees weaken. 12 children. The FBI is on their way. This is bigger than any of us imagined. And Emily's mention of other children being held somewhere. They're organizing search teams as we speak. A doctor in scrubs approached them. Dr. Rachel Hartman, according to her badge. Her face was grave. "Mr. Miller, I'm treating Emily. Could I speak with you privately?" They followed her to a small consultation room. Dr. Hartman closed the door and turned to face them, her expression a mixture of professionalism and barely contained anger. "That little girl has been through hell," she said bluntly. "Multiple fractures in various stages of healing, severe malnutrition, evidence of prolonged captivity and abuse. But she's also one of the strongest children I've ever encountered." She memorized details, the sounds of trains passing at certain times, the smell of specific foods being cooked nearby, even counting the steps between different locations she was held. "She said there were others," Samuel said. "Other children." Dr. Hartman nodded. "She's been providing information to the FBI agents who just arrived. Despite everything she's endured, her mind is remarkably clear. She said you promised to stay with her, Mr. Miller. She keeps asking for the farmer who said I'm somebody." Those words hit Samuel like a physical blow. He stood immediately. "Can I see her? Normally we'd restrict visitors to family only, but..." Dr. Hartman glanced at Tom. "Given the circumstances, and the fact that she specifically asked for you, yes. But Mr. Miller, I need to prepare you. She's going to need multiple surgeries, extensive therapy. Her recovery will be long and difficult." Samuel followed the doctor through sterile hallways to a room in the pediatric ward. 2 FBI agents stood outside the door, a stern-looking man and a younger woman who nodded as they passed. Emily looked even smaller in the hospital bed, dwarfed by white sheets and medical equipment. An IV dripped steadily into her thin arm, and monitors beeped softly. But her eyes were alert, and when she saw Samuel, something like relief crossed her face. "You came," she whispered. "I promised, didn't I?" Samuel pulled a chair close to her bed. Rebecca's quilt was tucked around her, a splash of homemade warmth in the clinical setting. The police people keep asking me questions, Emily said, about the bad man, about the dark places. But I wanted to ask you something. What is it, child? Why did you help me? The bad man said nobody would help me because I was broken now. He said good people wouldn't want a broken girl around. Samuel felt tears prick his eyes. He thought of his own daughters, safe at home, and couldn't imagine anyone telling them such cruel lies. Emily, listen to me very carefully, he said, taking her small hand in his weathered one. You are not broken. You are hurt, yes, but not broken, and even if you were, that would make you more deserving of help, not less. Where I come from, we believe every person is precious in God's eyes, every single one, even me, especially you. A knock at the door interrupted them. A woman burst in, Asian features, disheveled hair, eyes red from crying. She froze when she saw Emily, a sob escaping her lips. Mama, Emily's voice was uncertain, hopeful, terrified all at once. Oh, my baby, my sweet baby girl. Linda Chen crossed the room in 2 strides, carefully gathering her daughter into her arms. I'm here, Mama's here. I never stopped looking for you, not for one single day. Samuel stood to give them privacy, but Emily's hand shot out, grabbing his sleeve. Don't go yet. Please, tell my mama how you found me. Tell her you said I'm somebody. So Samuel sat back down and told the story while Linda Chen held her daughter and wept. He told her about the fog, the frightened chickens, the chain, and those 4 horrible words that no child should ever have to say. Linda's face went through a journey of emotions: horror, rage, gratitude, and fierce maternal protection. Mr. Miller, Linda finally said, her voice thick with tears. I don't know how to thank you. The police told me if she'd been out there much longer in the cold, no thanks necessary, anyone would have. No, Linda interrupted firmly. Not everyone would have acted so quickly. Not everyone would have cared enough to follow her to the hospital, to stay with her. You saved my daughter's life. Before Samuel could respond, Tom Walsh appeared in the doorway with the 2 FBI agents. Emily, the female agent said gently, I'm Agent Martinez. Are you feeling up to telling us about the place where you heard the other children? We have teams ready to search, but we need your help to find them. Emily looked at her mother, then at Samuel, drawing strength from their presence. It was a big building, old. It smelled like rust and old oil. There were trains, I could hear them. Not like subway trains, big ones. Freight trains. They came every night at midnight and 3 in the morning. Agent Martinez was taking rapid notes. What else can you remember? There were boats too. Not all the time, but sometimes I could hear foghorns and seagulls. And there was this sound like a bell, but not a church bell. It rang every 4 hours. The male agent, Agent Cooper, pulled out a tablet and started pulling up maps. Freight trains, boats, industrial area, could be several locations along the Delaware River. Wait, Emily said suddenly. There was a smell too, like bread baking. Every morning at 4 a.m. I could smell bread baking. It made me so hungry, but he never gave us real food, just crackers and water. A bakery near an industrial area by the water, with train access, Agent Martinez muttered, typing rapidly on her phone. We're narrowing it down, Emily continued, her voice growing stronger. The bad man, he wasn't alone. There were others. They spoke different languages sometimes. Russian, I think. Maybe Spanish. They argued about money, about shipments. They said the merchandise was getting too old, that they needed younger ones. Samuel felt sick. The innocuous words carried a horrible meaning when applied to children. Emily, Agent Cooper said carefully, the man who took you, can you describe him? Emily shuddered, pressing closer to her mother. Tall, brown hair, but it was fake. I saw his real hair once, it was grey. He had a scar on his neck, shaped like a moon. He wore nice clothes, like a business mat. But his hands, she trailed off. What about his hands, sweetheart? Agent Martinez prompted gently. They had marks. Burns, maybe. Old ones, and he was missing part of his little finger on his left hand. The agents exchanged glances. That's very detailed, Emily. You did amazing. I memorized everything, Emily said with a quiet pride that broke Samuel's heart. He said I was nobody, but I knew somebody would look for me. I knew my mama wouldn't give up, so I remembered everything for when I got away. How did you get away? Tom asked. How did you end up in Mr. Miller's chicken coop? Emily's face scrunched in concentration. It's fuzzy. They gave me something that made me sleepy. I heard them arguing. Someone said it was getting too hot, that the FBI was getting close. The mean man said they had to get rid of the problem merchandise. That was me. I bit one of them and tried to run a few days ago. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I woke up in a van. It was dark. Then I was being carried, and I heard chickens. The man carrying me, he wasn't the usual bad man. He was different. Amish, I think. He had the beard, the hat. He didn't say anything, just chained me there and left. I thought I was going to die there. But then Mr. Miller came. The room went silent. Samuel felt the blood drain from his face. Someone from his community, or someone dressed to look like they were, was involved in this horror. Tom's phone rang, breaking the tension. He answered, listened, then his eyes widened. They found something, Port Richmond area, abandoned warehouse matching Emily's description. SWAT is moving in now. Agent Martinez stood bookily. We need to go. Emily, you did incredible. Because of you, we might save those other children. After the agents and Tom left, the room felt suddenly quiet. Linda was stroking Emily's hair, humming softly, a lullaby that seemed to calm the little girl. Mr. Miller, Linda said suddenly, would you and your family, would you stay in touch with us? I know it's a lot to ask, but Emily seems to draw strength from you. And of course, Samuel said without hesitation, our door is always open. A nurse came in to check Emily's vitals and administer medication. As she worked, she mentioned that news vans were starting to gather outside. This is becoming a big story. Little girl found after 3 months, possible human trafficking ring. The media is going crazy. Samuel sighed. The Amish preferred to stay out of the spotlight, but he understood this was bigger than his community's desire for privacy. As he prepared to leave, Rebecca would be worried, and the afternoon milking couldn't wait. Emily called out to him, Mr. Miller, will you tell your chickens thank you? If they hadn't been scared and quiet, you might not have looked so carefully. Samuel smiled, the first genuine smile since this morning's terrible discovery. I'll tell them. And Emily, remember what I said. You're somebody. You've always been somebody. And now you're going to help save other somebodies too. As he walked back through the hospital corridors, Samuel's phone, the simple emergency cell phone he carried for the farmer's market business, buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Bishop wants to see you. Emergency meeting tonight. The community is frightened. Samuel's heart sank. He knew this was coming. The peaceful Amish community of Lancaster County was about to be thrust into a spotlight they never wanted, investigating an evil they could barely comprehend. And somewhere among them, or close to them, was someone who had participated in the trafficking of children. The hospital's automatic doors opened, releasing him back into the afternoon air. His horse, Brownie, nickered softly in greeting. As Samuel climbed into his buggy, he saw the FBI agents racing past in black SUVs, lights flashing, heading toward Philadelphia. He prayed for Emily, for the children who might be saved today, for his community about to face an unprecedented trial, and for the strength to face whatever darkness was about to be unveiled. The simple morning of feeding chickens felt like a lifetime ago. The Miller family's barn had never held so many people. By 7 o'clock that evening, over 200 members of their Amish community had gathered, their buggies lined up along the fence like black sentinels against the darkening sky. The usual quiet murmur of Pennsylvania Dutch filled the space, but tonight the voices carried an edge of fear and confusion that Samuel had never heard before. Bishop Amos Byler stood at the front, his weathered face grave beneath his broad-brimmed hat. At 73, he had led their community through droughts, floods, and the encroachment of the modern world, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Brothers and sisters," he began in Pennsylvania Dutch, his voice carrying across the barn, "we gather tonight in troubling time. As you have heard, Samuel Miller discovered an English child in terrible condition this morning. The child had been kidnapped, held prisoner, and," he paused, struggling with words for horrors their language was never meant to describe, "and treated in ways that go against everything we believe about the sanctity of God's children." A ripple of distress went through the crowd. Parents held their own children closer. "But there is more," the bishop continued. "The police believe someone from our community, or someone pretending to be from our community, may be involved. They will want to question us, to search our properties. The English media is already gathering, wanting to make us part of their story. We should cooperate fully," Samuel said, standing from his bench. "A child's life was saved, and others may still be in danger. We cannot turn our backs on this." "But at what cost?" challenged Jonas Yoder, an elder from a neighboring farm. "We have lived separately from the Inklings world for centuries. Now you would have us invite their police, their reporters, their chaos into our midst." "Their chaos is already here," Rebecca said, surprising everyone by speaking up in the men's traditional discussion. "Evil came to our doorstep. A child was chained like an animal in our chicken coop. How can we speak of separation when such darkness has already crossed our threshold?" "The woman speaks truth," said Abraham Stoltzfus, the community's blacksmith. "I've been thinking all day, who among us was out last night? Who has a van or truck that could transport a child? We must look within our own community." The barn erupted in shocked voices. The suggestion that one of their own could be involved was almost unbearable. "Peace," Bishop Byler called out. "We must not turn on each other with suspicion." But Abraham raises important questions. "Does anyone know of strangers in our midst? Anyone who has been acting unusually?" "There's Daniel Lapp," someone mentioned quietly. Daniel was a young man who had returned from Rumspringa just 6 months ago, seeming changed and withdrawn. "He's been going to the English world more often, saying he's working construction." But what?" the bishop prompted. "My son saw him at a truck stop last week, talking with men who didn't look like construction workers. When Daniel saw him, he left quickly." Samuel's eldest son, Jacob, suddenly spoke up. "I saw something too. 3 nights ago. I couldn't sleep and went for a walk. I saw lights at the old Zimmerman place. It's been empty for 2 years since they moved to Ohio. When I got closer, I heard voices not speaking Pennsylvania Dutch or English. It sounded like Russian, maybe." The barn went silent. The old Zimmerman farm was only 2 miles from the Miller property. Bishop Byler's face was troubled. "Jacob, why didn't you mention this before? I thought maybe someone was looking to buy the property." "I didn't think," Jacob's voice trailed off, the weight of what he might have witnessed settling on his young shoulders. Before anyone could respond, the barn doors opened. Tom Walsh entered, accompanied by Agent Martinez and 3 other FBI agents. The Amish community tensed at the intrusion. "I apologize for interrupting," Tom said respectfully, "but we need your help. We've just raided a warehouse in Philadelphia based on Emily's information. We found evidence that children were held there, but the building was empty. They'd been moved very recently, within the last 24 hours. Agent Martinez stepped forward. "We believe they were warned. Someone tipped them off, and we have reason to believe the children may have been moved to somewhere in Lancaster County." "That's impossible," Jonas Yoder protested. "We would know if strangers were hiding children in our community. Would you?" Agent Martinez challenged gently. "How many abandoned farms are there? How many old barns, empty houses? And if someone from your community was helping them, providing cover?" "Agent Martinez," Samuel interjected, "my son just mentioned seeing activity at the old Zimmerman farm. It's been empty for 2 years. The FBI agents immediately became alert. "Show us on a map," Agent Cooper demanded, pulling out a tablet. As Jacob pointed out the location, Agent Martinez made rapid phone calls. Within minutes, they could hear helicopters in the distance. "We need to move fast," she said. "If children are there, every minute counts." "Bishop Byler, we need people who know the property, the back roads." "I'll go," Samuel volunteered immediately. "As will I," Abraham said, standing. Several other men joined them. "This is a mistake," Jonas Yoder insisted. "We're being pulled into English problems. This will destroy our way of life. Children's lives are at stake," Bishop Byler said firmly. "That transcends all other concerns. Go, Samuel, may God guide you." The convoy that left the Miller farm was surreal. FBI vehicles with lights flashing, followed by several pickup trucks carrying Amish men who knew the local terrain. Samuel rode with Tom Walsh, providing directions through back roads that didn't appear on any GPS. As they approached the Zimmerman property, the helicopters overhead suddenly illuminated the farmhouse with spotlights. In that harsh white light, they could see vehicles, vans with no windows, the kind used for deliveries or moving equipment, or trafficking children. Movement in the barn, someone crackled over the radio. What happened next was chaos. FBI agents in tactical gear swarmed the property. Samuel and the other Amish men were told to stay back, but they could hear shouting, the sound of doors being breached, and then children crying. Samuel's heart clenched at the sound. Multiple children, their cries a mixture of fear and hope. "We've got them." Agent Martinez's voice came over Tom's radio. 6 children, all alive. "We need medical immediately." But the celebration was short-lived. Suspects are fleeing, north side of the property, heading for the tree line. Without thinking, Samuel was out of the vehicle and running. He knew those woods like the back of his hand, every path, every hollow, every creek. Abraham and the other Amish men followed. They spread out, their knowledge of the land giving them an advantage even in the dark. Samuel heard crashing through the underbrush ahead and veered left, knowing the path would force whoever was running to either cross an open field or double back. A figure burst from the trees, a man in dark clothes breathing hard. In the moonlight, Samuel saw his face and gasped. It wasn't Daniel Lapp or any stranger. It was Marcus King, a Mennonite from a neighboring community. Not Amish, but close enough that he could pass for one with the right clothes. Marcus had often done business with the Amish, buying furniture and quilts to sell to tourists. He had been in Samuel's home dozens of times, had eaten at their table. Marcus saw Samuel and stopped, raising his hands. "Samuel, you don't understand. You helped chain a child in my chicken coop." Samuel's voice was deadly quiet. "I had no choice. They had my sister's daughter. Said they'd kill her if I didn't help. I was just to hide the girl until they could move her with the others. But then the FBI got close. I panicked. I put her in your coop because I knew you'd find her, knew you'd help her. I was trying to save her by leaving her chained like an animal. I gave her the key," Marcus said desperately. "It was in her hand. She must have dropped it or—" The FBI agents caught up then, weapons drawn. Marcus dropped to his knees, sobbing. "My niece, Lily King, she's only 7. They took her 6 months ago. Said, if I helped them move through the county using my delivery business, they'd give her back. But they kept wanting more routes, more hiding places. The Zimmerman farm was perfect, isolated, but with good road access. Agent Martinez cuffed him, but her expression was conflicted. "Where's your niece now?" "I don't know," Marcus wept. "They said she was insurance. Please, you have to find her. She's just a little girl." As they led Marcus away, Samuel felt a hand on his shoulder. Abraham stood beside him, his face grim in the flashing lights. "This will tear our communities apart," Abraham said quietly. "Mennonites and Amish, we've lived side by side for generations. The trust—" Samuel nodded, understanding the deeper implications. Their communities operated on trust. Business deals done with handshakes, doors left unlocked, children playing freely. If that trust was broken, They returned to find the rescued children being loaded into ambulances. 6 small forms on stretchers, all conscious but in various states of malnourishment and injury. One little boy, perhaps 5 years old, reached out towards Samuel as he passed. "Are you farmers?" the child asked weakly. The bad men said farmers were coming to hurt her. "No, child," Samuel said gently, taking the boy's small hand. "Farmers came to save you." Back at the Zimmerman farmhouse, the FBI was processing evidence. Agent Cooper emerged from the basement, his face pale. "Chains, cages, surveillance equipment," he reported. "This was a major hub. They were moving kids through here to buyers along the East Coast. We found documentation, fake adoption papers, transport schedules. This ring is bigger than we thought. International." "How many children?" Tom asked. "Based on the records, dozens over the past 2 years, maybe more." Samuel thought he might be sick. All this time, this evil had been operating just miles from his home, from where his children played and worked. Dawn was breaking by the time they returned to the Miller farm. The emergency meeting had long since dispersed, but Rebecca was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. 6 children saved, Samuel told her, collapsing beside her on the porch swing. But Marcus King was involved, and there are more children still missing. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Emily's mother called. "Emily is asking for you. She wants to know if the other children are safe." "What do I tell her?" "The truth," Rebecca said simply. "That some are safe, and we won't stop until we find the rest." As the sun rose over Lancaster County, casting golden light over the peaceful farmland, Samuel knew their community would never be the same. The outside world had crashed in, bringing its evils and its heroes, its technology and its terror. But perhaps, he thought, that wasn't entirely bad. They had lived apart for so long, thinking isolation meant safety, but evil had found them anyway, using their very separation against them. Maybe it was time to find a new balance, maintaining their faith and traditions, while acknowledging that sometimes standing apart meant standing aside when action was needed. His phone buzzed with a text from Linda Chen. "Emily wants to know if she can visit your farm when she's better. She wants to thank the chickens." Despite everything, Samuel smiled. Evil had tried to break that little girl, had told her she was nobody, but she had survived, had helped save others, and still had enough light in her to want to thank chicken. If a 6-year-old could find hope after such darkness, surely their community could find a way forward too. 3 days had passed since the raid on the Zimmerman farm, and Lancaster County felt like a different world. FBI vehicles patrolled the rural roads, news vans clustered at every intersection, and helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. The Amish community, once invisible by choice, found themselves at the center of a media storm. Samuel stood in his barn, milking cows in the pre-dawn darkness, one of the few normal things left in his routine. The familiar rhythm of the work helped calm his troubled mind, but even here, he couldn't escape the reality of what was happening. 2 FBI agents were stationed at his property for protection after Marcus King had revealed under interrogation that the trafficking ring might target Samuel for disrupting their operation. Mr. Miller, Agent Martinez appeared in the barn doorway, her typically professional demeanor showing cracks of exhaustion. "We need to talk." Samuel finished with the cow he was milking and followed her outside. The agent looked haggard. She'd been working around the clock since the rescue. "Marcus King has been cooperating fully," she began. "He's provided names, locations, methods. But sir, what he's revealed, it's going to be hard for your community to hear. Tell me, the ring specifically targeted this area because of the Amish presence. They knew you don't typically involve law enforcement, that you handle things internally. They used that against you. And," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "they had help from someone else in your community, someone who's been hiding in plain sight." Before Samuel could respond, his son Jacob came running from the house. "Dad, there's something wrong at the Yoder farm. Their barn is on fire." In the distance, an orange glow lit up the sky. Samuel's blood ran cold. Jonas Yoder, the man who had argued against cooperating with the authorities. They arrived to find the Yoda barn fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky like angry fingers. The community had already formed a bucket brigade, but it was clearly too late for the structure. Jonas stood apart from the others, his face illuminated by the flames, looking devastated. "Is everyone safe?" Samuel asked, grabbing Jonas's shoulder. "My family is safe," Jonas said hollowly. "But Samuel, there was someone in the barn. We found chains in the loft, fresh food, blankets. Someone had been keeping a child up there, and when the fire started, Agent Martinez was already on her radio, calling for fire investigation units." But Samuel saw something in Jonas's eyes, not guilt, but a terrible recognition. "Jonas, what aren't you saying?" The older man broke down completely. "My son, my Timothy, he's been different since his Rumspringer 2 years ago. He came back, but he wasn't the same. Started going out at night, said he was courting a girl from another district. But last week I found money in his room. Thousands of dollars, Samuel. English money. When I confronted him, he said he'd been helping English people with deliveries. Nothing wrong. But now, where is Timothy now? He disappeared when the fire started. Samuel, what if my boy? What if he? The implications hung in the air like smoke. Timothy Yoder, 20 years old, raised in the faith, might have been part of a child trafficking ring. The thought was incomprehensible. As firefighters arrived and took over the scene, a small voice called out from behind the house. Everyone turned to see a tiny figure stumbling toward them, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, covered in soot, but alive. Lily, Marcus King's sister, Anna, who had arrived with other community members, rushed forward. Lily, oh my God! It was Marcus's niece, the child he claimed the traffickers had taken as insurance. She was alive, had been hidden in the Yoder barn. As the EMTs examined Lily, she kept repeating something in a traumatized whisper. The nice boy said I had to be quiet, said if I was good, I could go home soon. But then the fire came, and I got scared and broke the window. Agent Martinez knelt beside her gently. Lily, the nice boy, was his name Timothy? The girl nodded. He brought me food, said he was sorry, said he didn't mean for it to go so far. The manhunt for Timothy Yoder began immediately. But Samuel knew the young man wouldn't get far, not in a community where everyone knew everyone, where strangers stood out like beacons. Sure enough, by noon word came that Timothy had been spotted at the old covered bridge, sitting on the edge, looking down at the water below. Samuel arrived before the police, finding the young man he'd known since birth, perched precariously on the bridge railing. Timothy looked up, his face streaked with tears and soot. Don't come closer, Samuel, Timothy warned. I can't face it. What I've done, what I became. Timothy, talk to me, help me understand. The young man laughed bitterly. During my Rumspringer, I went to Philadelphia, met a girl at least. I thought she was just a girl. She was beautiful, worldly, everything our girls weren't. She introduced me to her brother, said he had business opportunities. Started small, just driving packages. No questions asked. Paid better than any farm work. Samuel stepped carefully closer. When did you know what you were really transporting? 3 months in, heard crying from the back of the van. They threatened to hurt my family if I stopped. Showed me pictures of my little sisters at school. Said they had people everywhere. So I kept driving, kept delivering. Became the inside man for Lancaster County, helping them find places to hide their cargo. And Lily, I couldn't let them sell her. Timothy's voice broke. When they brought her to the Zimmerman farm, I recognized her from community gatherings. I snuck her out, hid her in our barn, was trying to figure out how to return her without exposing myself. But then everything fell apart when you found that girl. Emily, her name is Emily. I know her name. Timothy shouted. I know all their names. They haunt me. Sarah from Baltimore, crying for her grandmother. Michael from Newark, who stopped talking after the second week. Amy from Richmond, who tried to escape and he couldn't continue. Timothy, come down, help us find the others. You can make this right. Make it right. Timothy laughed hysterically. I helped steal children from their families. I kept them in cages. I delivered them to monsters. There's no making that right. Before Samuel could react, Timothy let go of the railing, but instead of falling backward to safety, he fell forward, toward the water 30 feet below. Samuel lunged forward, managing to grab Timothy's shirt, but the fabric tore. The splash echoed through the covered bridge. By the time they pulled Timothy from the water, he was unconscious, but breathing. As the ambulance took him away, Agent Martinez stood beside Samuel on the bridge. He'll survive, she said, and when he wakes up, he'll face justice. But his information could save lives. That evening, the entire Amish community gathered again, this time at the Byler farm. The mood was beyond somber. It was broken. 2 of their own had been involved in unspeakable evil. Parents looked at their children with new fear. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. Bishop Byler stood before them, looking older than his years. We have failed, he said simply. Not just Timothy and Marcus, but all of us. We were so concerned with staying separate from the world that we became blind to the evil, using our separation as a shield. What do you mean? Someone asked. I mean that our isolation, our reluctance to involve outside authorities, our handling everything internally, these things we thought protected us actually made us vulnerable. Evil counted on our silence. Mary Yoder, Jonas's wife, stood up, her face ravaged by tears. My son is lost to me. But how many other children might be lost if we don't act? I say we help the English authorities. Complete cooperation. But our ways, someone protested. Our ways didn't prevent this. Mary shot back. Our ways allowed it to flourish in shadow. Perhaps it's time to consider that some traditions need to adapt. It was revolutionary talk for an Amish gathering, but Samuel could see heads nodding, especially among the younger members. Bishop Byler raised his hand for silence. I propose something unprecedented. We form a council, Amish, Mennonite, and English authorities together, to ensure this never happens again, to protect all children, not just our own. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. Nothing ever was, but it passed by a significant majority. As the meeting dispersed, Samuel's phone rang. It was Linda Chen. Mr. Miller, Emily is being released from the hospital tomorrow. She's doing so much better, but she has a request. She wants to testify. The FBI says she doesn't have to. She's been through enough, but she insists. She says she needs to speak for the children who can't. Samuel's throat tightened. She's very brave. She says she learned it from you, from when you told her she was somebody. Mr. Miller, would you come to the hearing? She says she can be brave, if you're there. Of course. After ending the call, Samuel found Rebecca in the kitchen, baking bread, her way of coping with stress. Their 3 children were at the table, unusually quiet. Dart, Ruth, his youngest, asked, "Are we safe? Will bad people come for us?" Samuel sat down, pulling her close. "We're safer now than we were before," he said, "because now we know evil doesn't always look like evil. It can wear familiar faces, speak familiar words, but we also know that good people, when they work together, are stronger than evil." "But Timothy was our friend," Mary said. "How could he do those things?" "I don't know," Samuel admitted. "Maybe he got lost. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe the English world showed him things that twisted him. But that's why we must be vigilant, not just against strangers, but against the darkness that can grow in any heart, even our own." That night, as Samuel lay in bed, he thought about the children who had been rescued, and those still missing. He thought about Emily's courage, Timothy's fall, Marcus's desperate choices. He thought about his own community, forever changed. Rebecca reached for his hand in the darkness. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about that fog," The morning I found Emily. How it obscured everything, made the familiar strange. Maybe we've been living in a different kind of fog. The fog of isolation, of thinking we could keep the world out by ignoring it. And now the fog is lifting, and we must face what's been hidden in it. Outside, an owl hooted, a normal sound of a Lancaster County night. But nothing would ever be quite normal again. The innocence was lost, but perhaps something else was being born, a wisdom that came from facing evil directly and choosing to stand against it, even when it meant changing everything you thought you knew about your world. Tomorrow Emily would testify. Tomorrow Timothy would wake up and face justice. Tomorrow the work of rebuilding trust would begin. But tonight, Samuel held his wife's hand and prayed for the children who had been saved, for those still lost, for his community struggling to understand, and for the strength to face whatever revelations tomorrow might bring. The federal courthouse in Philadelphia stood like a fortress of glass and steel, a world away from the simple wooden structures of Lancaster County. Samuel adjusted his black hat nervously as he climbed the steps, Rebecca beside him in her plain blue dress and bonnet. They had never been in such a building, but they were here for Emily. Linda Chen met them in the lobby, her professional attire a stark contrast to their simple clothing, but her smile was warm and grateful. "Thank you for coming. Emily's been asking for you every few minutes." They found Emily in a small waiting room, dressed in a pink dress with tiny flowers, a far cry from the torn blue rag she'd worn when Samuel found her. She looked healthier, her cheeks had some color, but her eyes still carried shadows that no 6-year-old should have. "Mr. Samuel," she ran to him, and he knelt to receive her careful hug. "Did you bring Mrs. Rebecca?" "I'm here, little one," Rebecca said softly. "We're both here." Emily looked between them with such trust that Samuel's heart ached. "I'm scared," she admitted in a small voice, "but Agent Martinez says being scared is okay as long as I tell the truth." "That's right," Samuel agreed. "The truth is always the right path, even when it's frightening." Agent Martinez entered the room, followed by a woman in a suit. "Emily, this is Mrs. Davidson. She's the prosecutor who will be asking you questions. We've practiced this, remember?" Emily nodded solemnly. "I tell what happened. I speak for the ones who can't speak." The courtroom was packed with media, law enforcement and families of missing children. Samuel and Rebecca were given seats directly behind Emily and her mother. Across the aisle sat several defendants in orange jumpsuits, including Marcus King and Timothy Yoder. Timothy's face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. The attempted suicide had broken something in him beyond physical injury. But it was the man at the end of the defendant's table that made Samuel's blood run cold. Tall, gray-haired, with a bad dye job, leaving brown streaks, a crescent scar on his neck, and his left hand missing part of the little finger. This was Emily's bad man, Victor Kozlov, according to the nameplate. He stared at Emily with cold, calculating eyes. "Don't look at him, Emily," Linda whispered to her daughter. "Look at Mr. Miller, or me, or the Judge Harrison," a stern-faced woman with silver hair, called the court to order. "I understand we have a young witness today. Emily Chen." Mrs. Davidson stood. "Your Honor, given the witness's age and the trauma she's endured, we request permission for her support persons to remain close." "Granted. Proceed carefully, Counselor." Emily was helped into the witness chair, which had been adjusted for her small size. She looked tiny in the formal setting, but when she placed her hand on the Bible to swear to tell the truth, her voice was clear. "Emily," Mrs. Davidson began gently, "can you tell us what happened on July 15th of this year?" Emily took a deep breath, her eyes finding Samuel's. He nodded encouragingly. "I was at the playground with my mommy. She was reading on the bench, and I was on the swing. A man came up and said his puppy was lost, asked if I could help find it. He seemed nice. He had pictures of the puppy on his phone. What happened next? I followed him to the parking lot. He said the puppy might be hiding under cars. When I bent down to look under a van, Someone grabbed me from behind. They put something over my face that smelled funny, and everything went dark. Linda Chen was crying silently. Rebecca reached over the barrier to squeeze her hand. When you woke up, where were you? In a dark room, no windows. There was a mattress on the floor, and a bucket. The man with the scar. She still wouldn't look at Kozlov. He was there. He said my mommy didn't want me anymore. Said I belonged to him now. The prosecutor continued carefully, drawing out details. Emily described the warehouse, the other children she could hear crying, the men who came and looked at them like they were picking fruit at a store. Her testimony was devastating in its innocent honesty. Emily, how did you end up in Lancaster County? They moved us a lot, always at night, always in vans with no windows. The last place was different. Countryside, I could smell farms. There were Amish people, but one of them was wrong. Wrong how? His beard was fake. I saw it slip when he was carrying me, and he had a tattoo on his wrist. Amish people don't have tattoos, do they? Mr. Samuel? Samuel was startled to be addressed. The judge looked at him. Sir, you may answer the child's question. No, Samuel said clearly, we don't have tattoos. Emily nodded, vindicated. The fake Amish man, that's him. She pointed at Timothy Yoder. He brought us food sometimes. He looked sad. Once he said he was sorry, but the man with the scar hit him and told him to shut up. Timothy's head dropped to his hands. His parents, watching from the gallery, looked destroyed. Emily, the prosecutor said gently, I need to ask you about the night Mr. Miller found you. Can you tell us about that? Emily's composure finally cracked a little. The man with the scar was very angry. He said the police were getting close, that they had to get rid of the problems. That meant me and 2 other kids who had fought back or tried to escape. He said, take your time, sweetheart. He said, dead kids don't testify. The words fell into the courtroom like stones into still water. They gave us shots to make us sleepy. When I woke up, I was in the chicken coop, and there was a chain on my ankle. I thought I was going to die there. But then the chickens got quiet, and Mr. Samuel came. He found me. He said, I was somebody. She turned in her chair to look directly at Samuel, tears streaming down her small face. You saved me. You said I was somebody when everyone else said I was nobody. The defense attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, stood for cross-examination. Several people in the gallery shifted angrily at the thought of him questioning this traumatized child. Emily, he began, his voice artificially gentle. You've been through a terrible ordeal. Sometimes when we're scared, our memories get confused. Objection, Mrs. Davidson said firmly. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Ask your question, counselor. Emily, you said it was dark most of the time. How can you be sure about the identities of... Because I memorized everything, Emily interrupted, her young voice gaining strength. Every sound, every smell, every face. The man with the scar has a gold tooth on the left side. Timothy has a birthmark behind his right ear. The warehouse had a broken window on the east side that let in light at sunrise. I know because I counted every sunrise, 43 sunrises in the first place, 28 in the second, 9 in the last place, before the chicken coop. She looked directly at Kozlov for the first time. You said I was nobody, but I remembered everything because I knew someday I would tell everyone what you did. You took Sarah Martinez from Baltimore on June 3rd. She had a birthday in the dark place, and cried because her mom always made her strawberry cake. You took Michael Kumar from Newark on May 15th. He was wearing his Little League uniform and you burned it. You took Amy Thompson from Richmond on April 22nd. She had asthma, and when she couldn't breathe properly, Your Honor, the defense attorney interrupted desperately. The witness is discussing matters outside the scope of the witnesses providing detailed information about other victims. Judge Harrison said coldly. I'll allow it. Continue, Emily. Emily listed 6 more children, with dates, details, things only someone who had been there could know. FBI agents were frantically taking notes. Parents in the gallery were sobbing as they heard their missing children's names. "How do you remember all this, Emily?" Mrs. Davidson asked gently when Emily paused. "Sarah, the oldest girl there, she taught us a game. We would whisper our stories to each other at night, over and over, so if any of us got out, we could tell the families what happened. She said, even if we died, our stories would live." "Where is Sarah now?" Emily's face crumpled completely. "I don't know. When they took me away, she was still there. She gave me her hair ribbon to remember her." Emily pulled a dirty pink ribbon from her pocket. "She said to give it to her mom if I got out." A woman in the gallery let out a wrenching sob. "That's Sarah's. That's my baby's ribbon." The judge called for order, but tears were flowing freely throughout the courtroom. Kozlov suddenly stood up, his chains rattling. "This is ridiculous," he shouted in accented English. "Listening to lies of traumatized child. She knows nothing. Sit down, Mr. Kozlov," the judge ordered. But Emily stood up in her chair, all 4 feet of her facing down the monster who had terrorized her. "You said nobody would believe a throwaway kid, but they believe me. You said I was nobody, but I'm somebody. I'm Emily Rose Chen, and I survived you." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Kozlov lunged forward, but was restrained by bailiffs. Parents were crying and calling out. The judge was banging her gavel. When order was finally restored, Emily finished her testimony with devastating precision, providing enough details to launch investigations in 6 states. When she finally stepped down, she walked straight to Samuel and Rebecca, collapsing into their arms. "Did I do good?" she whispered. "You did more than good," Samuel told her, his own eyes wet. "You were a warrior for truth." The testimony continued with other witnesses, but Emily's words had broken the case wide open. Timothy Yoder took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against the ring in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed a network that stretched from Russia through Europe to the United States, dealing in the most innocent victims. Marcus King also testified, revealing how the ring had operated in Lancaster County, using the Amish community's isolation against them. He named names, provided routes, exposed the entire operation. By the end of the day, Viktor Kozlov and 6 other ring leaders were facing life sentences. The FBI announced they had leads on 12 more missing children, based on Emily's testimony. As they left the courthouse, Emily walking between Samuel and Rebecca, while holding her mother's hand, reporters shouted questions. But Samuel noticed Emily wasn't paying attention to them. She was looking at the sky. "What are you thinking about, little one?" Rebecca asked. "Sarah always that even in the darkest places, if you look hard enough, you can find light." She was right. Mr. Samuel was my light in the chicken coop. "And you," Samuel said quietly, "were light for all those other children today." Linda Chen stopped walking and turned to face Samuel and Rebecca, fully. "I can never repay what you've done. Not just finding her, but standing by her, giving her strength." "No repayment necessary," Samuel said firmly. "This is what people do for each other." "Is it?" Linda asked, looking around at the city, the crowds, the complex world they inhabited. "I'm not sure everyone would have done what you did." As they parted ways, the Chens to return to Philadelphia, the Millers to Lancaster County, Emily ran back for one more hug. "Mr. Samuel, will you still tell the chickens I said thank you? Every day," he promised. And when Sarah and the others are found, can they visit the farm too? Sarah would love the chickens. She grew up in the city and never saw farm animals. "Our door is always open," Rebecca said, meaning it with every fiber of her being, as their buggy rolled through the Philadelphia streets toward home. Samuel reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed. A week ago, their biggest concern was the harvest and preparing for winter. Now they were part of something larger, a fight against an evil they couldn't have imagined, but also a testament to the power of courage, truth, and compassion. "She was so brave," Rebecca said quietly. "They all were," Samuel replied, thinking of Emily, of Sarah still missing, of all the children whose innocence had been stolen, but whose spirits remained unbroken. The sun was setting as they reached Lancaster County, painting the farmland gold. Their farm came into view, and Samuel saw Jacob, Mary and Ruth waiting on the porch. His children ran to greet them, full of questions about the trial. As Samuel unhitched the horse, he looked at the chicken coop, that simple structure that had become the unlikely setting for a miracle. Tomorrow the trials would continue. Tomorrow the search for the remaining children would intensify. Tomorrow, their community would continue grappling with the betrayal within their midst. But tonight, he would tell his chickens about Emily's gratitude. He would hold his family close, and he would thank God for the fog, that October morning that had made him look more carefully, that had led him to a little girl who thought she was nobody but proved to be somebody capable of bringing down an empire of evil. The spring sun warmed Samuel's face as he guided the plow through the dark soil, preparing for planting season. The familiar rhythm of farming had returned to Lancaster County, but nothing else remained quite the same. The FBI command post had long since departed. The news vans had moved on to other stories, but the changes in their community ran deeper than any plow could reach. A car pulled up to the fence, something that would have been unusual before but had become commonplace now. Samuel recognized Linda Chen's vehicle immediately, but this time she wasn't alone. Emily burst from the back seat, now 7 years old and healthier than he'd ever seen her, running toward him with unbridled joy. Mr. Samuel, guess what? They found her. They found Sarah." Samuel's heart leaped. Sarah Martinez, the 13-year-old who had taught the younger children to memorize their stories, had been the last missing child from Emily's testimony. For 6 months, the FBI had searched, following leads across 3 countries. Linda Chen approached more slowly, smiling. "She's alive, Samuel, found in a shipping container in Montreal, about to be trafficked overseas. But alive," she asked for Emily the moment they freed her. "When can I see her?" Emily bounced with excitement. "She's recovering, sweetheart. But Sue, she's been asking about the farm you told her about in your letters." Over the months, Emily had written letters to all the children who had been rescued, as well as to the memory of those who hadn't made it home. She'd insisted Samuel and Rebecca help her, creating a correspondence network that connected survivors across the country. "Is she really coming for the gathering?" Emily asked, her eyes bright with hope. The gathering, it had been Rebecca's idea. A healing harvest, she called it. A day when all the rescued children and their families could come to the farm, to see beauty where there had been darkness, to create new memories to overlay the traumatic ones. If the doctors clear her, Linda assured her daughter. A buggy approaching on the road caught Samuel's attention. Bishop Byler and, surprisingly, Jonas Yuda. The Yuda family had become reclusive since Timothy's conviction, 25 years in federal prison, even with the plea deal. But here was Jonas, looking older, but somehow more at peace. "Samuel," Jonas greeted him, climbing down from the buggy. "Right on, we wanted to contribute to the gathering. Mary's been quilting non-stop. Says idle hands leave too much room for sorrow." "Your contribution is welcome," Samuel said warmly. "How is Mary?" "Better. We visit Timothy every month. He's different. The prison chaplain says he's working with a program to help identify trafficking victims. Trying to atone, I suppose." Bishop Byler cleared his throat. "Samuel, I've had a letter from the national news program. 60 Minutes. They want to do a story about our community's response. I'm inclined to decline, but thought you should know." "The story's been told," Samuel said firmly. "What matters now is the healing." Emily had wandered to the chicken coop, where she now stood talking animatedly to the chickens. The structure had been rebuilt, the old one too tainted by its role in the horror. But Emily insisted on visiting every time she came, thanking the chickens for their part in her rescue. "She's remarkable," Jonas observed, watching the little girl. "After everything, to have such light. Children are resilient," Linda said, though her voice carried the weight of the nights she'd held Emily through nightmares. "But the scars are there," She still won't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. Rebecca emerged from the house with Ruth, Mary, and Jacob, all carrying supplies for the gathering preparations. The 3 Miller children had changed too, more aware of the world's dangers, but also more committed to fighting them. Jacob, now 17, had started working with a program that taught internet safety to Amish youth venturing into Rumsinger. Mary had begun studying emergency medicine. Even little Ruth had become fiercely protective of younger children in their community. Mrs. Chen, Ruth ran to Linda with a basket. "We made Emily's favorite choufle pie." Emily's face lit up. On her first visit back to the farm after the trial, Rebecca had introduced her to the traditional Pennsylvania Dutch dessert. It had become her favorite, a sweet association to overlay the bitter memories. As the afternoon wore on, more families arrived to help with preparation. The Stoltzfus family brought tables, the Fishers contributed flowers from their greenhouse, and even some Mennonite families, working to repair the trust broken by Marcus King's involvement, brought food and supplies. Marcus himself was serving 15 years, but his testimony had been crucial in dismantling the ring. His sister Anna arrived with Lily, who ran straight to Emily. The 2 girls had become close survivors of the same evil, finding solace in shared understanding. "Emily," Lily said quietly, "Sarah's really coming." "She's really coming," Emily confirmed, hugging her friend. As sunset approached, Samuel stood surveying the transformed farm, where 6 months ago there had been crime scene tape and federal agents. Now there were tables laden with food, strings of handmade lanterns, and a banner painted by the rescued children that read, "We are somebody." Linda found him by the fence, watching Emily teach the Miller children a clapping game Sarah had taught her in captivity, turning a survival mechanism into playground fun. "I never thanked you properly," Linda said quietly. "You've thanked me 100 times, Samuel replied. "No, not for finding her, for what came after, for showing her that the world still had good people, for proving that faith, real faith, not the twisted version those monsters used, could be a source of strength." Before Samuel could respond, vehicles began arriving, families from Philadelphia, Baltimore, Newark, Richmond, all connected by the horrific crime, but coming together for healing. And then, a medical transport van. Sarah Martinez emerged slowly, supported by her parents. At 13, she looked older than her years, her eyes carrying knowledge no child should have. But when she saw Emily running toward her, her face transformed. "Sarah, Sarah," Emily flew into the older girl's careful embrace. "Hey, little warrior," Sarah said, her voice hoarse with emotion. "You did it. You told our stories. We did it," Emily corrected. "Your memory game saved us all." Other children gathered around. Michael Kumar, walking with a slight limp, but smiling. Amy Thompson, clutching her mother's hand but brave enough to be here. 6 others, all bearing invisible wounds, but standing together. Rebecca had prepared a special meal, deliberately simple and comforting. As everyone sat down to eat, Samuel was asked to say grace. He stood, looking at the gathering. Amish, Mennonite, English, different faiths and backgrounds, united by tragedy but choosing healing. "God," he began, his voice carrying across the farm, "we thank you for bringing these children home. We thank you for the strength you gave them in darkness, for the courage you gave Emily to speak truth, for the love that brings us together tonight. Help us to remain vigilant against evil, but not to let fear rule our heart. And help us to remember that every child, every person, is somebody in your eyes. Amen. Amen," echoed across the gathering in various languages and accents. As the meal progressed, Emily stood up, tapping her fork against her glass in a gesture she'd seen adults do. The gathering quieted. "I wanted to say something," she began, her small voice clear. "When I was in the dark places, I thought I would disappear. The bad man said I was nobody, that no one would look for a nobody. But Mr. Samuel found me and said I was somebody. And then all of you," She looked at the other survivors. You became somebody's too. Sarah, who kept our memories. Michael, who shared his food even when he was hungry. Amy, who sang to the younger kids when they cried. She paused, gathering courage. We went through something really bad, really bad. But we're here, we're alive, and we're not alone. The bad people tried to sell us like things, but they couldn't sell our, she searched for the word. Our spirits, Sarah supplied softly. Yes, our spirits. They couldn't sell those. Emily looked directly at Samuel. Mr. Samuel says his chickens helped save me by being quiet that morning. But I think it was more than that. I think God made sure good people would find us, and now we have to be good people for others. She sat down to thunderous applause, embarrassed but proud. As darkness fell, the lanterns were lit. The younger children played games Rebecca had organized while the adults talked quietly. Samuel found himself standing with Agent Martinez, who had come for the gathering. Any updates on the investigation? He asked. Kozlov was sentenced to life without parole last week. The ring is completely dismantled, 43 arrests across 6 countries. Your community's cooperation made the difference, Samuel. Your willingness to break with tradition, to engage with law enforcement, it saved lives. It changed us. Samuel admitted, not our faith, but our understanding of our place in the world. We cannot be so separate that we become blind to evil. Timothy Yoder had written a letter for the gathering, which his father Jonas read aloud. It was an apology, raw, honest, taking full responsibility. He asked for no forgiveness, only that his story might prevent another young person from being drawn into such darkness. Even Emily listened solemnly, understanding that Timothy was both criminal and victim. As the evening wound down, families began saying goodbye. Each rescued child planted a tree seedling in a special grove Samuel had prepared, life growing where death had threatened. Emily planted hers between Sarah's and Lily's, their small hands patting the earth together. These trees will grow tall, Samuel told them. And years from now, when you're grown with children of your own, you can come back and see how something beautiful grew from something painful. Linda Chen was the last to leave, Emily asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the emotional day. Samuel, Rebecca, she said, I'm thinking of moving closer, to Lancaster County. Emily feels safe here, and I want her to grow up knowing your family. You would be most welcome, Rebecca said warmly. There's something else, Linda added. Emily wants to do something for other children who've been through trauma. She's too young now, but she talks about it constantly. She says when she grows up, she wants to be like Mr. Samuel, someone who finds lost children and tells them they're somebody. Samuel's throat tightened. She already is that person. As their car disappeared down the dark road, Samuel and Rebecca stood together, looking at their transformed farm. The tables would be cleared tomorrow, the lanterns taken down, normal life would resume, but nothing would ever be quite the same. Do you regret it? Rebecca asked quietly. How everything changed. Samuel thought of Emily's testimony, of Sarah's strength, of the children playing tonight where evil had once lurked. He thought of his own children, more aware but also more compassionate. He thought of their community, wounded but working toward healing. No, he said firmly. Evil came to our door uninvited, but we chose how to respond. We chose to be light in darkness. Sound from the chicken coop made them both turn, just the normal rustling of chickens settling for the night. But Samuel smiled, remembering. I should tell them about today, he said. I promised Emily. Rebecca laughed softly. Go ahead, I'll make tea. Samuel walked to the coop, opening the door to check on his birds. They clucked softly at his presence, familiar and comforting. Emily says thank you again, he told them, feeling only slightly foolish. She planted a tree today. She's healing. They all, as he turned to leave, something caught his eye, a small envelope tucked into the wire mesh. His name was written on it in careful child's handwriting. Inside was a drawing and a note. "Dear Mr. Samuel, this is a picture of the day you found me. See, there's you and there's me. And there's the chickens. But I drew the sun coming up, because even though it was dark, you brought light. Thank you for telling me I'm somebody. Because of you, I can tell others they're somebody too. Love, Emily. P.S. Sarah says thank you too. She's going to visit the chickens next time." Samuel stood in the chicken coop, this place that had become sacred ground, and wept. He wept for the children who had suffered, for his community's lost innocence, for the evil that existed in the world. But mostly he wept with gratitude, that God had used him, a simple farmer, to be part of something larger. Rebecca found him there, tears streaming down his weathered face. She didn't ask why, she understood. They stood together in silence, holding each other in the place where horror had turned to hope. 5 years later, on another spring morning, Samuel stood in the same spot, reading a letter. Emily, now 12, had written to tell him she'd won an essay contest about heroes. She'd written about him, about the morning he found her, about how one person choosing to see her as somebody had changed everything. But more importantly, she wrote about Sarah, who was now 18 and starting college, studying social work, about Michael, who despite his injuries had become a champion for children's safety, about Amy, who volunteered at a shelter for runaway youth, about all of them, the nobodies who had become powerful somebodies. She ended her letter with words that Samuel would carry forever. "You taught me that even in the darkest places, there are people who will look for us, who will see us, who will declare us somebody. Now it's my turn to be that person for others." The chickens started it all by being quiet that morning. You continued it by looking carefully, and now we all carry it forward. The knowledge that every person matters, every child is somebody, and that light is stronger than darkness. Thank you for finding me, but more importantly, thank you for seeing me, forever. You're somebody, Emily. Samuel folded the letter carefully, placing it with all the others in a wooden box Rebecca had made. The box was nearly full now. Letters from Emily, from Sarah, from children he'd never met but who had heard the story and found hope in it. The chicken coop had been rebuilt twice more since that October morning, once after a storm, once to expand it. But Samuel always made sure to tell the new chickens the story, as promised. It had become legend in their family. The morning the chicken's silence saved a little girl who would go on to help save dozens more. As he walked back to the house, Samuel saw Jacob teaching his own young son to gather eggs. The cycle continued, but with new wisdom. They still lived simply, still held to their faith and tradition, but they also understood their responsibility to the wider world, to be watchers and protectors, to see the somebodies that others might overlook. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning dew, revealing the grove of trees the rescued children had planted. They stood tall now, their branches intertwining, creating a canopy of life where once there had been only trauma. At the center, Emily's tree grew strongest of all, its roots deep, its branches reaching toward heaven. And in the rebuilt chicken coop, the chickens went about their simple business, unaware that their moment of frightened silence had changed the world for dozens of children. But Samuel knew. He whispered his thanks to them every morning, a ritual that Rebecca no longer teased him about, because sometimes, Samuel had learned, God works through the smallest things, through frightened chickens, through morning fog, through a farmer who simply looked more carefully than usual. And sometimes that's all it takes to save a life, to declare someone somebody, to begin healing that spreads like ripples on a pond. The story of Emily Chen and Samuel Miller became more than just news. It became a reminder that evil flourishes when good people look away, but miracles happen when they choose to. And in the peaceful farmland of Lancaster County, where Amish and English, traditional and modern, had learned to work together for the protection of all children, the miracle continued. Every spring, when the children's grove bloomed, people came from all over to see it. They came to remember, to hope, to heal. And Samuel would tell them the story of a foggy October morning when everything changed, when a little girl who thought she was nobody proved that everybody is somebody, and that love and courage are the strongest forces in the universe. The end came not with fanfare but with quiet grace. Emily, grown and strong, returning to the farm with her own daughter, teaching her to gather eggs, telling her the story of the brave chickens and the kind farmer. The cycle complete but never ending, trauma transformed into triumph, darkness overcome by light, and in that simple chicken coop where horror had once lived, hope made its permanent home.